My name is Esther Choo. I'm an emergency physician, a researcher, and an advocate for equity and safety in healthcare. I have the pleasure of being here with a remarkable panel of physicians behind me who are changing the world every day with their advocacy work. I wanted to start this session with my own advocacy story. It is not spectacular or magical. This is one for all the people out there who feel like they are just ordinary and wonder if they can do advocacy after all. I would say up until May of 2017, I did what I would call advocacy light. And maybe some of you can relate to advocacy light. I contributed to causes. I shared articles. I signed the occasional online petition. I even showed up for a march or two. I considered myself an advocate for diversity and inclusion, but I did it on my own time in ways that felt comfortable. I tweeted a lot, but didn't do it with purpose or direction or with any specific outcome in mind. And I would say that I did advocacy in a way that never tested boundaries. It never got me out of my comfort zone as a mom, as a physician, as an introvert, as someone who wanted to leave the heavy lifting to other people and just stay comfortable and convenient. Does anybody relate to that kind of advocacy? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, but I think this is the advocacy that a lot of us fall into. And then something happened. In May of 2017, the United States House of Representatives passed a bill that would dismantle the Affordable Care Act. This act, also known as Obamacare, had led to an expansion of healthcare coverage for millions upon millions of Americans. And as a physician, I knew that this bill, if it passed, would harm many people, but it would disproportionately harm women and young children. And as a women's health researcher and as a mother, I knew that if I didn't step out of my comfort zone and do something big against this bill, I would never forgive myself. And so there I went, thoroughly out of my comfort zone, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so this is what I did. I got a bunch of my physician friends across my networks, and I asked them to share their stories about what would happen if this bill passed, what would happen to their patients, how would it harm them, and I tweeted like crazy about that. And then I wrote some articles in the popular media talking about why physicians oppose this bill. I put together a composite video of physicians discussing the kind of harms that would come from the passage of this bill. And I started a campaign online called Doctors Speak Out that was propagated widely and even picked up by the New York Times. And in the end, that bill went to Senate and it failed there. And by that time, I was one of thousands of physicians and hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens who had stood up and opposed the bill. And I can tell you, looking back on that experience, if you were to assign people on a scale from 1 to 100, 100 being the most influential in blocking that bill, I feel pretty confident that my influence was somewhere very, very close to 0. And I'm okay with that because that experience was an inflection point for me. And it completely transformed my feeling about the role of advocacy for healthcare providers. And I think the best way to sum it up is a piece that was written by Don Berwick in JAMA of that year. Dr. Berwick said that it was chilling to him to see the great institutions of healthcare assume that the seat of bystander was still available. He said, that seat is gone. And he said to try to avoid the political fray through silence is impossible because silence is now political. Either engage or assist the harm. There is no third choice. Either engage or assist the harm. There is no third choice. And when I read that, I knew that this is the way that I had changed. I realized that I had the option of being silent about the healthcare bill and many other issues because of my tremendous privilege, because of my education, my employment, my wonderful private insurance, my relative wealth. I could sit aside and stay silent on the healthcare bill if I chose. But if I stayed silent, I was saying implicitly that I was perfectly happy letting those suffer who didn't have my kind of privilege. And when you think about it in that way, how can you ever stay silent again? And I'd argue that pretty much everyone in this room, by virtue of your education and your training and your opportunities and your mobility and your networks and your voices, you all come from a position of tremendous privilege. And so after that, I pretty much never went back into my comfort zone. I continued speaking up about a lot of issues, including those related to equity and safety in healthcare. And I think that's where most of my energy and my visible work went. And because of that, I had the opportunity to participate in a very special kind of advocacy. You may be familiar with Time's Up. This is a nonprofit organization that was started by a few prominent leaders in Hollywood because of egregious sexual harassment and assault in that industry. They advocate for safe, equitable, and dignified workplaces everywhere. They have started 6 affiliate organizations across industries. The latest was launched on March 1st, and it's called Time's Up Healthcare. And I, along with 65 incredible leaders across healthcare, served as its founding members, and I had the honor of being the strategic lead for this organization. This is a picture from our launch event on March 1st, and I think if you just look at it, you get a sense of our vision and the scope of our work. Holding the microphone is a nurse. Next to her is a physician assistant. Next to her is a nurse's aide, then a home health aide, then a psychiatrist, then a senior nurse, and then a pediatrician. And surrounding them are women in healthcare who represent a wide variety of fields and a lot of diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And yes, this is an all-female panel, and I am not sorry. So although this leadership experience is still new to me, and I will share with you that stepping outside of the emergency department, outside of the hospital, and outside of my research office is the most terrifying thing I've ever done, I do have one insight to share with you, and it is this. All of you as healthcare providers are the most trusted people in society. You have natural authority when you speak. Every day that you see patients, you are collecting the stories that tell us why we have to change our policies, our practices, and our priorities in healthcare. You also constantly read and process data and translate it to people of all kinds, just as part of your regular jobs. You have specific goals that have to do with making your patients' lives and your communities better. And you also advocate every single day on behalf of your patient and their families. I have seen the advocacy on the stage in SMAC as you encourage other people to do better by your patients. And all of these are the essential qualities of a good advocate. So I would say for those of you who kind of yearn to advocate on a bigger stage, I want you to know that in your everyday practices, you have been practicing for just that. And when the time comes that you feel the imperative to step up on behalf of a cause, but you find yourself holding back because you're waiting for the real leader to come forward and take charge, I want you to know that you have everything in you that you need to be that leader. Everyone here is enough for this work right now. I will leave you with a quote from one of the women I admire most in this world, Michelle Obama. She says, "You will not always be able to solve all of the world's problems at once, but don't ever underestimate the importance you can have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own." So I hope today, as you listen to this incredible panel, you see yourself and your potential in their stories.